Alright, 당은 좀 당은 자상 지게 미나데 둔저이나 가리네 창마 내 심전 창마 안에 대화되어봐다 동아 미되어봐 지버레스 자상 대화되고래 동아 되고 말레스 자상다 대화되어봐다 동아 미되어반장 아주 동아디 매봐서고 거래 대화된 줄 주고 거라 자 동아 매봐서도 동아디 간스 용고래 람나 만주기 류레 템베게 안에 동아지 용고래 안낭 셈레 템베 동아지 용고라 제사다 디네자 안주 동아 매봐서야 돼야 류레 템베 동아 세야 직다 하는 아주기 낭 셈레 때네 안 동아 세상으로 동아 매봐서다지 리바로 니 차로 그러와 동아 용다데라 류레 템베 동아지 용고래 안낭 류 대오여베네 낭 셈레 템베 디키지 동아지 용고라 제사디 다 류레 템베 동아 세상 낭 셈레 템베 동아 세상세 동아 세타데 이용고라.
Good evening. So all of us here and all humans everywhere, we share in common with also animals and unseen beings is a deep inner yearning to experience only happiness, a happiness that is free from any kind of suffering or problem or difficulty, no matter how slight. And in order to achieve our desired lasting stable happiness, we need to eliminate all forms of suffering. So happiness, we need to accomplish the causes for happiness, and the causes that would otherwise lead to suffering, we need to eliminate. So the suffering that we experience, it arises either in dependence on our body or in dependence on our mind. And therefore, having these two streams of directions from which we can experience suffering, then we need to eliminate the suffering that can arise in dependence on either our body or in dependence on our mind.
당저 류레 템비게 동아야 되다지 류레야 나자다야다 아니지 캬베 동아다 아니지 차와치비 동아 안데네기 세주기 마템비 동아 대용용도 당저 가르세고라세네 아니 캬송 받는 둘러 두부 고야 당 정모 차와이나 안델리아 지 차르데야다 데네지 류레 나자주디 면주시야다 아니 아주 류제제지 류기 안데다서야다 안데네 토네 두시네 저기 류레 템피게 동아야 되게 두시나 저기 다디 간주 지소나리아 안지기 지데 차사나리아디 라렌 다단 대고르와 대동데
Kind of experiences we have of suffering that arises in dependence on our body would be, for example, illness that we experience or temperature-related discomfort, either too hot or too cold. So these we have lots of experience of, but also in society, the solutions to this kind of suffering is also well known, and people apply themselves to it. For example, one will take medicine when one is ill, one will try to exercise and eat healthily to look after our body, we'll wear appropriate clothing that's appropriate to the climate, and so forth, all in order to eliminate the suffering that arises in dependence on our physical body.
semla tembe dungadi 저기 안지게 면죄제야다 안지게 두로고야다 데네게 안지게 차주야다 데네 칼라사야다 데네게 토네 아주 셈기 강하디 세투야 매바래 지산데 셈기 강하세야디 셈 코로나는 삼다제 셈감릭비 토네 셈 삼로 데니시다나 삼로 가네시 매와수 삼로 두아데 가네시 매와수야라 삼로 야가 가르땅고도 세비 셈감릭비 토네 니 제바제제 삼로 따제 내 셈기 강한 매와수야디 데니스 셈감릭비 토네 소고로 하다가서
However, no matter what medicine we eat, or medicine we take rather, or clothing we wear, or food we eat, we won't be able to eradicate the suffering that arises from our mind. Rather, to eliminate the suffering that arises from our mind, we need to dive into the realms of psychology. We need to transform our way of thinking, because it's only through transforming our way of thinking that we can eliminate the suffering that arises in dependence on our mind.
나지자 가시에 가서 셈바 마기와다 셈냐 강아망고 시원 년슈다 셈냐 강아망고 레드 아니 가시에 나 되니게 셈지 강아 세 돈달이야 안창 창도야 라신 되네 아니 지게 매 시멘세 로서바다 누 제난직 강아 세게 탑시 땅 거때 이내야 창아로 뚱베네 창 통제 라신 베네가블라 되어야 강아니 메바로 차고데 양 창게 뉴버디 야파 예로도 양 가가 다잘 라샬리고로 지지 메로 시멘로 세베네 두제로 세베네 디 뉴버디 냠로도 야제 강아 다갈리고로 제가 둥아 메디 뉴버 예디가블라 셈디 파 지게 초아메바로 수지데 기부라치 데네 강아메바 리고르티네 뉴버 예르도 야젤리고 제산 디sam기 저기 리고말 가시게 온심을 강아시고도 데네 강아 세열 돈알이야 라시 잡시고로 데네 라 소소라소 시고로 데네 셈지 강아 세야지요 말와 제산 저기 셈지 강아 세디 강아 파세지 소소를 디기 용하게 돈달라 강아데 세고고로 제산 데네 인자당 저기 데네 강아 세에 탑블럼 약쇼디 셈감리과 삼리톤에 세야디 약쇼 차고래
Not recognizing this, it's quite common for people to try and deal with suffering that arises in dependence on their mind through solutions which are from the material or the physical world. So when one is mentally unhappy, then people will take drugs or perhaps drink alcohol or even take a prescribed psychiatric medication. And whilst this will have certainly will have an impact on the suffering that one is experiencing and the mental suffering one is experiencing, it will have an impact in the short term in that one's senses are dulled or one may be knocked unconscious. When one sobers up or the psychiatric medication wears off, because the source of the suffering hasn't been altered, the suffering again returns. And when people experience this over a protracted period and end up feeling that there's no hope, there's no solution for their situation, they may even take their life. The solution, the long-term solution here, is to change our way of thinking, to transform our mind, because in this way we can deal skillfully with any arising mental suffering.
ane samla tangche samla kana tang kanga sigide sede ta dene ki rimba ro chmangbo yebe na ne dang joge ta bo kunlo telia da dele ya ane se rang chibu ane chi dunga se ya ge samta na chi da rang le shen semje rajan chama semje tham chi gi dunga se udu sembe ge samta na chi che samta na ro chi rimba ro suma sone ni yung go ro da ka shin ne so so rang da chanda sam sharama da so so rang dunga se na kanga se ya ge se udu samje ya samla ta na chi yung go ro denchi simja thamje nga dewa deobare dunga midu banashi simja thamje dewa deobare dunga midu chigbare denza simja thamje dunga de segu de dewa da digi tupugudu sambe samata je na simja thamje gi dondo ni dunga simja thamje gi dunga se da digi tuya de ngi jehin sambe ge 쿨 캐르제네 아니 심자 탐산 요거바 토벌 쇼 세비게 자슈 셈 군노로 시테네 삼다 안디 돈에 한 저기 기신 다니엘이야 팔진 진배 냠는지 야기 디고르 셴는데 수팀 냠는지 야다 언도 디바도 레르와 당죠
When one looks at psychology of the mind, then one can approach this from many different ways. So the one is to deal with the motivation. So a skillful way is to broaden our way of thinking. Because all too often we are self-obsessed, especially when experiencing suffering. Self-obsessed in the sense of our suffering overwhelms us and we just can only think about our own suffering. So here we need to train our mind so that when this arises, we recognize it and we make our outlook more expansive, recognizing that what I'm experiencing now is not unique to me. There are many other beings who are suffering in this exact same way. Moreover, there's a far greater number of beings who are suffering in a way that's even worse than I am. And in fact, all beings, whether suffering like myself or in a worse way or in a lesser way, all want to be freed of all forms of suffering. I am no different from others. So in this in the same way that I want to be freed of this suffering that I'm experiencing now, so too does each and every sentient being want to be freed of the suffering that they are experiencing. Therefore, I will endeavor to transform my mind completely, transform my mind so that I never suffer again, and I will do so for the sake of others. And through my spiritual development, through my mental transformation, may I become the most skilled of guides, may I become a Buddha, so that I can guide others to also become free of suffering. In this way then, one generates bodhicitta, and with this motivation then, one engages in the cultivation of various practices, including the 6 perfections. And this is where we've come now in our presentation, and we looked at in preceding weeks at the training of generosity, and last week we started to look at the training in ethical restraint. So the first 2 of the 6 perfections.
ngamba sido shan rashin niga le ne ki lunga gi choba de le de ben nga yu ko ne zin she ya an mi le ya ko ha ta ya an chi nga gi choba shan le ya chik sup she ya de ni gi le ya de de zo shan le ya nu go re shan nga de chik sup she ba ne shan pa jo de mi sem ma ji wa she ya ko ha ta ya ta zin she ba ne shan le ya nu go re但现在呢，对第一件事让来那个人，让来刚刚离过了，现在刚刚让是你干了刚刚哪个绝吧？绿旗绝吧的，绿旗绝别个他呢，现在只有贵啊当，现在年冬大呀老说吧的，里面别个他看起来现在那边个家伙，现在对吧的米团别家伙，另外个绝吧，这么的几个节节，现在也刚刚蒙不这样，按第一件事呢，说也刚刚来的，另外个绝吧安排的，真的离过了，其实另外个绝吧安排的，我说没法说活了。其实那就没有学活了。
So to review what we looked at then last week, we spoke about the need to refrain from engaging in behavior that brings harm to others and thereby to ourselves as well. Here we need to restrain any harmful physical behavior or verbal communication. Because, for example, if we communicate with others in a deceptive manner, or we lie directly or deceive others, or we speak to others in a harsh or an abusive manner, this clearly brings harm to them. Also, we will receive problems and difficulties in return, both in the immediate and long term. And similarly, with our physical behavior, we need to restrain from any harmful physical behavior. For example, being violent towards others, of course, stealing from others. Because this, of course, brings harm to others as well as to ourselves. So the first type of ethical restraint is, at the very least, to restrain our physical and verbal behavior from going in the direction of harm.
那让心你给来评估了吧，变成俺个绝吧上坡，你这些那不些的政府些的，现在还没个话的，就是你说好我妈的怕俺个的路段这些路段这些怕判断这样的，俺这个旅游过呢，现在也判别讲话讲，现在俺这个的这个去哪定标的那个旅游过呢，都是真的，俺从送给这些出怕说了教育当。现在若不这样了说法的，但那个他呢，另外个就把上坡这个先来评估了，让先你给来评估了。但那现在当俺做了开始过过的，现在另外个就把安排的没过下的，但没法说过过的。现在另外个就要上坡的俺做过过的，另外做了过过的，另外做哪人打过过的。其实但那现在的另外个就把安排的上坡你的。有段见面把这个嘛对吧来练要嘛的，其实有段见起来对你离过的。가르를 때는 리고레스다 두스는데 그 류가 줘봐 안바데 가르를 때는 리고도 류가 그 줘봐 상보디 간스질 연구도 니니 용하게 규디 당아도 제고로와 근데 돈돌 마서나 야 누구지에게 사본 되는 지에나 누구 되는 게냐한테 제보라고도 사본 되는 답나 될라 때는 안 제보 약고 리미도 하신베게 딱 누구지에 돈돌 용하게 뉴사본이디 약도 제고도 디나 생아저 류가 그 줘봐 안바다 상볼해야지 가르릴 때는 리그도 세뱅아도다 도시인데 심주시하고 삼당고 걸어와
recognizing what is unwholesome physical behavior or verbal communication that we need to refrain from, we need to also recognize what is the wholesome physical behavior and verbal communication that we need to cultivate and engage in. We need to communicate to others, for example, in an honest manner. We need to help others where we can, where we have knowledge and skills that others don't. We should share this so as to help others develop their skills. And as we've seen in the current floods, where people who have skills have been helping those who face great difficulty, helping animals who would otherwise drown, for example. So here, these are wholesome behavior, beneficial behavior, and this is what we need to engage in. And here, the benefit comes to both ourselves as well as to others. So there are these two sides here. Firstly, recognizing what constitutes wholesome and unwholesome physical behavior and verbal communication. And then, having recognized those, we look at how do they come about. And we'll see very easily that they don't arise causelessly, but one engages in a particular type of speech or activity always in dependence on particular causes. So recognizing that one's behavior is going in a direction of being virtuous or non-virtuous, in dependence on causes, we then need to come to see what those causes are, seek out, find, identify those causes. Because it's through cultivating a particular set of causes, one will move in a particular direction. Then we need to identify which are the causes of wholesome behavior and cultivate those, and which are the causes of unwholesome behavior and avoid those. So just like if you want to have particular plants in your garden, you know those are the seeds that must be planted. You can't just scatter any seeds and expect to have the plant you want to grow. You have to plant the appropriate seed. Likewise here too.
안두스네 나가주두스네 삼다베네 나주기 나니바 밀리아 셴리아 측sup셰야나 주인셰기 삼로디 아까소레 딩하디 쮸바디 간슬리도 다 류유고네 샬라 네비게 쮸바 간슬리도 두 심주제디 만조 삼노 나라야 셈나라 삼노 나라야 니 콜리아 측sup직 셰고 셈베기 콜런네브직 셰고 셈베 삼로지 코요디 딩하니 바 측sup도 형고르바 류유고네네 니 직자라디 쿠쿠쿠도 쿠마 짜고 선비게 군롱라야 구 자라디 구예기 되바 군롱지레어도 딘 류유고네 로는 쿠마 짜고로 구고로와 제사다 류 군롱기 나로레 젠기 되바데 미딘비게 자와딩이 디체고 선비게 삼로 레어도 딘 류유고네 류가고네 아니 자제디 제제산 라션니가라 네비게 자와디 딜리고 제자 된자 류가기 쮸방 안바디게 차상 거리고서 낭 셈레데 리고레 삼노 나려야 징이디 제고고 셈비 군로 쥐여바나 니고 꾸모고 구고레 나요 네 셈나려야 콜레 측sup시긴 콜레 녀바 지긴 셈베 삼로 쥐여나 안디 류가기 쮸바디 퇴전에 안전나레 녀바 지고로바 제자 된자 셴리아 류가기 쮸바 네비게 쮸바디 쮸방 안바디게 차상 낭 셈레데 용고레 제 귤마선다다 낭 셈노 군노데레다
Take illustrations from your own experience of when you've spoken in a harsh manner towards someone and see what preceded that. And there will be a number of things you can point to, but look closely at the moment before one spoke in a harsh manner and you'll see there was a thought wanting to speak in this way. There was a thought wanting to perhaps respond in this particular way, but one didn't speak in a harsh manner from nowhere. It didn't come from nowhere. There was an intention to speak in this way, no matter how brief that thought arose. Likewise, if one deceived someone, perhaps intentionally lied, there was a thought process that preceded the speech. And again, this may have been quite expansive. It may have been so fleeting that in the moment one wasn't necessarily aware of it. But preceding speech was thought, was intention. Similarly with physical behavior, if one has taken something that's not yours, This came from a thought, a wish to have that, an intention to take this. So here, look at examples from your own daily life and be aware that everything one says or physically does follows from an intentional thought. No matter how fleeting, there was a motivation. So this is crucial. One needs to identify the role that our mind plays in the resulting of verbal communication or physical behavior.
Andina she lunga ge joba sangbo yang de nang semla sangbo che ngi kola pembe tuki kola ya kanga ma de di pembe tuki sembe samlo kunlo joba na lunga ge joba de ya bushli hore chesa lunga ge joba sangbo yang ya na lunga ge joba ngamba yang de nang kunlo la samlo le ra le hore chesa di chesa lunga ge joba chesa dine yenza ngazul ma so nang samlo di penang model masona ngaju lunga luda ngada lunga nibode modana shire da model tangandi na midida ngaju semni jigbare chesa model de kawa ro mado de el ro de yon ro de khodu ro de tangandi midil rale ro chesa tangan midigi yon ba ro samna ko model yon ba ro ko de el ro san el ro khodu ro san khodu ro re Jablon Madosan, Jablon Dugor, she said, Dangan Midil Rally Gorova. And Dina she, Mazus, some now to some not to call a never you was simply some of Cheven, Lunga Jebang, Tangent, never Giada. Some not to call a pember Dugo, simply some not died, Lunga Jeba Tangent, call a pember Duyada. And then I did there was some who did the room in the Chesna draw simply champion draw some of the partner do compare to Gorova. Chesna that some non yell draw some who would yell go to yon draws and yon go to some non got some carcos check to Chesnati Nancy Ludi, Lugi, Lunagi, Pichit, and so the non some not in Lungo. Chesna to some of you are tango, said Chesna some of the let's so check or
And take illustrations where one has engaged in wholesome speech and behavior, perhaps where one has helped someone or where one has spoken in a kind and gentle way, perhaps calmed a friend who's in distress. And similarly here, speaking in such a manner, responding in this way, or helping physically in a productive manner, this too didn't come about causelessly, but came about following a thought process. No matter how brief or how detailed, thought preceded physical or verbal activity. An analogy here that makes this very clear is that one can liken our body and speech to a car, and the driver of the car one can liken to the mind. The car goes nowhere unless the driver directs it, and the car goes precisely where the driver directs it to go. Similarly, our speech and our physical behavior follows the direction of our mind. So whether we are on autopilot, not really aware of our thought process, or we are acting with great care and attention, speech and physical behavior always follows from thought. That you are sitting here, that you remain sitting here, both of these are independent on thought. When you decide to move your body or to get up and leave, this will come about independence on thought. Whether one goes in this direction, that direction, it all follows from thought.
Gane dikaya la kanaka worsen shenle ya lunga yi yu kange kone shenle nebe gi jawa se de zawa chin jigmya se be samlo tango gore di samlo de anjuge lamsan tang de lamsan mewa chaya ma ko nganju luzi le ma sonda dangbo ne jidu ge di chin jigin chin de luzi de yawo chaya de subu ni wo chaya de chagyo ro ma do dangbo ne luzi jigin se de yawo chagyo ma ro ko jangi jen ko luzi yawo chagyo ro di na shin nganju samlo na le ine shenle ge nebe jawa ji jigmya se be samlo de yane yado tang de dang de surum so asi gore surum so je shenle lunga yusum je shenle nebe jawa zawa yin jigme se be samlo de surum si gore di samlo de yane yado tang go di samlo de yane yado tang ba ne shenle nebe jawa je go se be samlo de ligo ma ga san ko ni dokso cha de ro wa 지나 샹라 뉘베 자와 지금에 선배 삼로 레어 파송 레어도 샹라 뉘베 자와 지고 선배 삼로 리고 말 디말레나 류가의 죄바 샹라 뉘베게 류가의 죄바도 된거 말와 진짜 되네 현상 안저 삼로 나나 갔던 것은 샹라 뉘베 자와 싸워딘 지금에 선배게 삼로디 다야 되게 계침을 수름 송고를 해서 해야 되는 가서 뒤 수름 써야 되디 디마다
From these preceding segments, then, it should be clear that the great role that our mental process plays, whether one is engaging in a harmful manner or a beneficial manner, or interacting with others in a harmful or beneficial manner, depends on our way of thinking. Recognizing this, we can recognize then that it is through transforming our way of thinking that we will transform our resulting speech, our resulting physical behavior. Because in the same way that right now, in certain circumstances, in dependence on particular causes, one spontaneously responds in a particular manner, this still comes about in dependence on thought. Therefore, through transforming our way of thinking, one will ensure that even in trying circumstances, spontaneously one will respond in a beneficial manner. Instead of now, perhaps, where one would spontaneously respond verbally in an aggressive manner, through training well, training one's mind well, one will respond in the same situation spontaneously in a beneficial manner. So this is a similar process that people engage in developing particular skills and talents. For example, in the sporting arena, when one starts out, one really is not very coordinated, one has somewhat limited skill, but through training repeatedly over a sustained period, one can reflexively respond in a way that one couldn't previously. This is due to developing skill, developing habituation. So this is what we need to do. And the habituation is specifically in terms of our way of thinking, turning our mind towards virtue or wholesome ways of thinking, and preventing our mind from abiding in unwholesome ways of thinking. And this is the meaning of ethics. Fuller translation, ethical restraint. Restraining the mind from coming under the influence of unwholesome ways of thinking or afflictive ways of thinking or non-virtuous ways of thinking, and keeping one's mind virtuous or wholesome. This is the meaning of ethics. Keeping one's mind away from being under the influence of delusions or afflictions, such as the wish to harm others, the wish to respond in a harmful manner in some way. So the first training of ethics is to cultivate or develop within oneself the commitment not to harm. And through developing this mental commitment not to harm, one's speech and behavior will not be harmful.
Denege 추름 소야데 삼다야데 추름 세야데 디케신 되슈베 다 데네 자다 안저 릭 추름 delaya ane 데네 예제 덴비 추름 사다 개와 추디기 추름 심제 된지기 추름 사다 다 조데 예제 덴비 추름레 지다 예제 덴비 추름레나 개와 추디기 추름다 심제 된 추름디게 레라 용도 거 지다 데네 자 다데 예제 덴비 추름 세도 류가 유스미오네 샬라 뉘베 자와 자기 지금에 선배 삼로도 세야네 야도 땅요도 안다 다 가르리고선 시한래 팬비게 개와 시한래 팬비게 자와디게 능이 두긴 선배 삼로디 디야야네 야도 땅고 거디 시한래 뉘베 자와 지금에 선배 삼로디 가제 숙체 따나 시한래 팬비게 자와 두긴 선배 삼로디 숙체 리고 지자 시한래 팬비 자와 두비야기 두벼도 개와 소소 개와사 거와 지자 개와 추디기 수름시 거래 나 심제 되지기 수름세데 시한기 강아 세야리야 시한 동아 never even the solid Jovia and Shane Dungus Jelia and Robache Dungal Seaki, Shane you Dunga Juya and dear Seata and Shalia Lobdun Jeja, Lamdun Jeja, Ganga Seata, Digi to be a tablam, Lamdun Jeja, Consule, Pa Lapche, Consule, and Digi to be a tablam di, and the 강아시야 다 디기도 탈음네 야고 신야게 된다 건설 납제 냠네 제주바데라 아니 셈전 되지기 수tum시고 그래서 디 다스 냠네 제야디 가서 그신 또 수tum이고 쉬어야 되리 마
This first type of ethical restraint is really of great importance. This commitment not to engage in any harmful conduct. Because it's independent on the cultivation of this type of ethical restraint that the other two divisions can be cultivated. So there are three types as we looked at last week, and the second arises independence on the prior cultivation of the first, and the third arises or can be developed independence on the prior cultivation of the preceding two. So the three types of ethical restraint, our text didn't mention them so explicitly, but they were the ethics of restraining from harmful conduct, secondly, the ethics of collecting virtue, and thirdly, the ethics of benefiting sentient beings. Of these three, because the latter arises independent on the prior, one has to start with the first, the ethics of restraining from harmful conduct. And this is what I've just been describing in the preceding segment, the commitment not to bring harm. However, together with cultivating the wish not to bring harm, we can and should cultivate the wish to bring benefit. Cultivate these two together. We need to cultivate the wish to bring benefit to others, to ease the suffering of others. And cultivate this, though, not in isolation, but in conjunction with the cultivation of the determination not to bring harm to others, not to add to their burden of suffering. And if we cultivate these two together, we will then be able to respond to others with skill, with care, with kindness. But if one just focus on, for example, cultivating a mind of love, wanting to be of benefit to others, but is still instinctively or spontaneously responding in certain circumstances with anger or aggression or frustration, of course then one's prior wish to be of benefit cannot be fulfilled. However, if one cultivates the two together, the valuing of others, the wish not to bring harm to them, as well as valuing them and wishing to benefit them, these two together will ensure that not only does one not harm others, but where one has the opportunity and the resources, one will benefit others.
하지만 제르무치기 람림디든 나라소야데라 제라메스 수림 예제 제마 트비추 녀모 차동세외 다위위 계위 위나 림보 더블지 dob기 디바 메버 조근디 대더르 시내 양다 랑비 팀 담반남기 미신 송어르 제스.
So that's where we looked up to last time, and I'll just briefly re-mention the three types of ethical restraint because they're not in the text. The ethics of restraining from harmful conduct, the ethics of collecting virtue, and the ethics of benefiting sentient beings. So now turning to page, I think it's 41 in the text, we have a quotation from Lama Tsongkhapa, from Je Rinpoche, and this is where we came up to last week. So you'll have it there in the middle, page 41, but I'll read a slightly different translation. The meaning's the same, but it's a little bit more literal, so it's easier than to when Genda teaches it. Ethical restraint is the water cleansing stains of harmful conduct. It is the moonlight dispelling the burning torment of the afflictions. In the midst of beings, it is majestic like Mount Meru. It draws together all migrators without any threat of force. Knowing this, holy beings perfectly guard the ethics they have chosen to adopt as they do their eyes. So I'll read it again as Genda goes through it.
다 추림 예제 tema 추비 추세 추림 세야되는 저 다데 샤마 타파들에 룽아 유스미 요거네 샤라 네비게 자고 지금에 삼로다 룽아 유스미 디바 룽아 유스미 디바 세데 자오기는 지금에 삼로도 추림제 추림세야 니가래라나 예주 지마 추비 추레서 다 예주 예바죄바 예주에서 예주라나 룽아기 류다 나다 권에 샤라 네비게 자와 지산 니 디마디 아니 가서 륜하게 예주 안바디게 샬라 라샬라 네비 륜하게 자와데 아니 디마치 예주제 지산디 투에기 투비 추 매바서야디 수림들이 해서 저사랑 아주 둘로를 마서나 둘로를 마서 잡아도 거야 되나 잡아디 매바서야를 추주제네 다기로 추주인데 매바서고로 아디나시 만절야 군로래 셈나 륜하게 줘봐 안바디 샬라 네비 륜하게 줘봐디 예비 줘봐 니간스 용고르스네 용구레라나 셈나래 샬레 네바 륜하 샬레 지금 네비게 자와다 샬레 고고타야 삼로 군롱 안바딜레든 리고레스 제가 데니고 군롱 안바디 륜하 유스미고네 샬레 네비 자와 지금 매 심비 수림디 바 송노도 수림디 바 냠는 제어도 데네 륜하게 가서 군롱 안바디 리고 마레스 군봉 안바디 말레디 륜하게 쥐봉 안바디 리고 마레스 제가 디 수림세야디 지마 데니기 매버서야기 추나지레스 추레세오다.
The first line, ethical conduct is water to clean away the stains of non-virtue. Non-virtue then, here we can understand as explicitly referring to unwholesome or harmful physical behavior or verbal behavior, that which follows from the mind. An ethical conduct or ethical restraint is likened to the water which cleans away the stains of non-virtue, the stains of harmful physical and verbal behavior. And this is because, as we've seen in the preceding segments, it's from our way of thinking that our speech and our physical behavior always follows. If our way of thinking is ethical, then our behavior, whether physical or verbal, will not be harmful. Moreover, it will bring benefit to others. So, ethical restraint is water to clean away the stains of non-virtue. Non-virtue, again, here refers to physical and verbal behavior, because ethical conduct itself is mental. So if someone has an ethical outlook, if someone is ethical, it means their way of thinking is not dominated by afflictions or destructive emotions, but rather is virtuous. So therefore, their mind being virtuous, the behavior that will follow will not be harmful at all. Again, the first line, ethical restraint is water to clean away from the stains of non-virtue. So hopefully from this description then, where non-virtue is seen as physical and verbal, it makes it clear that the ethical restraint is referring to the mind. Therefore, our training, when we train in ethics, is to train our mind, ensure our mind is staying virtuous.
ane dulo dimanga bakana mishandale de ane kiwme o diesel dimanga bakau sumne nyamde nya madyo ja tarings chedene tarings de ane de ane so nanas gar kiwngo mar o dadi ngale pha dredu sembe sam ma kiwa cha dene ki dulo ngamba di dulo la jaba mangbo di jenje ne ane subo la na zhe ya kanga de mangbo li go wa dene ki su dulo ge jaba de meba so le ba chu 最先的主要的大年度了张嘛下的这个这么面巴他的也会用过了吧第南新度了这把他的呢让来呢先来呢你个纽约呗第南新啊说了什囊了呀先来那边接我身边的先给对吧的每天比给你接我身边的这的那个什么公路安排去呗呢第个见见呢那两个就安排去第一见见呢先来那吧给 안 되니까 류가 줘봐 되니까 개버전 안 소소랑랑라 강 라신이가 강아래야 돼 세대를 삼다나 라신이가 강아 당아 저기 최고 계시의 개와 치마 레균에서는 니기 대부 개와 치마 임만나야 내가 가서라 개야다 동안용 거야 어두스는 게 레양 봐 사고래 제르와 지산 dimang 봐 사대 다디 매봐 써야 돼 간에 소구리라나 둘로를 잡아 여바나진 매봐 써야 돼 가서는 출파 주의신의 매봐 써고도 디나신 아 저기 삼롱 안바 류가 쪼봉 안발레게 삼롱 안바 매봐 써야라 다 삼롱 갈당 고래서는 샬레 네베 자와다 아니 생기 Debate between big Java, Shan Chick me, some Samlo Sui, somebody, the near Samlo de Yana and Tangore, this wouldn't place. Digi, and the Chebangamba, Yayaki, Kulongamba, the Meva Sugore, Katugore, Di Gardu, Lunga Chebangamba, the Katugore, Di Gaban, Rashinigala, Kangayaki, Dagabia Kangayumare, and the Mahobane, and the Kangayaki, and Chigiliang Ambassago, and then also like Yada, the Humare.
Ethical restraint is water to clean away the stains of non-virtue. So just like if one has been wearing one's clothing for a long time, it will start to smell, and keeping on wearing it, it will smell ever more, but you yourself will be very familiar with the smell. You won't be aware of the stench. Then you meet someone. They are immediately aware of the smell. They don't want to be near you at all. They will want to keep their distance. Unhappiness arises in their mind merely from meeting you. You being aware of this, great embarrassment arises too. You now become unhappy as well. So similarly with this, similar to this analogy then, ethical conduct is water to clean away the stains of non-virtue. So in that circumstance, in that situation rather, you will immediately apply yourself with vigor to clean your clothes. Your clothes, because they have been so stained by being worn continuously for so long, you'll need to clean them with very clean water, with great energy, repeatedly over a sustained period. Slowly, the coarser dirt will come out, and then the stains will weaken, and eventually the smell will go. So similar to this illustration then, we need to apply ourselves to our mind. Ethical restraint is the cleaning solution to clean away the stains of non-virtue, of the afflictions, and all the resulting non-virtuous behavior. So we need to apply ourselves just like a committed, when you're committed to cleaning yourself, apply yourself to your mind repeatedly, taking care of it, guarding over it, removing all stains of non-virtue as the afflictions arise. Don't allow them to abide, remove them. Just like if you hand washing, scrubbing away day after day, trying to get your clothes not to smell, in the same way we need to apply ourselves with vigor to our own mind. And as we do this, we will start to see a change in our way of thinking, and thereby in our way of interacting with others. And this will have an immediate benefit, firstly on ourselves, because our mind will be more restrained. As we become more ethical, in other words, as we restrain our mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions, we will be mentally more restrained. Therefore, our speech and our behavior will be more restrained. Our mind will be more peaceful, calm, happier. So therefore, immediately we receive benefits. Those that come into our orbit, those that we meet and come into contact with, we will be able to interact with them in a way that at the very least doesn't bring harm to them. But moreover, we are more likely to also benefit them. Because when we're training in both abandoning the wish to harm as well as cultivating the wish to benefit, with a more restrained mind, we will not only not harm others, but we will have the capacity to benefit them. So benefit will come to others in the immediate term as well, and through the accumulation of this virtuous karma, we will be creating the causes for good rebirths in our future lives. So therefore, there are long-term benefits to the cultivation of ethical restraint as well.
단에는 니바들의 녀몽 자동슬위에 다위위스. 단 녀몽 바세디 아주길 베네 니마 차오슈 저나 차와슈 저나 베직 차오여나 차위 동아 강아 여러 디나시 녀몽 바세디 아주길에 기영바나 수정아 좀 매기버시고래 제랑 마기바 샤라 마기바 먼저 삼나라야 베네 녀몽 바세도 공조 시켜바이나 다 공조 시켜바이나 공조디게 소소라 마기버서야 미션달라 마기버서야 다 내가 라셔니가라 마기버서야 데네 공조도 슈체저도 르응하게 쥐방한 바테 아니 나하고는 측sup셔야 류유관에 샬라 내버기야 지사 되니게 라신이가 강아 안디기 제부 몽바나 네 체델이나 라신이가 강아요한테 제부데 다케와치마 삼타면은 디기 량아바사 디에는 케와치마 간소기야 디기 동안요야 체거래 제사 뇨몽바세디 베베네 컨트롤 디나시 다 되차 마kia 마리 뇨모브릭 마리 그 망고여 뇨모바 간스케베네 뇨모바 디기 아주일라 라신이가 강아테야 체거래 제사 베 니말 마소나 차위게 치네 강아테 디나시 뇨몽바세디 뇨몽바세디 뇨몽 데네게 차동 데네게다 강아 용야디 매버 쇠발라 뇨모도 매버 쇠발라 근데 추름 숨고고래 제 류하게 쥐바디 방안바디 지션에 너버 직매에서 변에 콩로게디 시한라 잠지게 시한라 잠바던 제와 삼동 공부이나 콩로사가 자기니 기매 기주매 아 선배 삼다원 야네 양도 삼다원이나 디 콩로게야야 원고 차르고 용고 말아 디나지다 시한라 류가 유스미 시한라 너버 직매 선배 추름 숨요디 되네 아니 아들에 비네 가소레 뇨모베 강아들 이기 말했어 뇨모바 기기 말해 뇨모바데 마게나 라신이가라 강아들 용고 말했어 제가 차위 차와드 매와서 비네 채널 공리야 저기 서비스 다와 파샤로 등아도 강베 나르베 차와라 줄 지시고 줘버네 치료도 받으면 시티닝 찬수고를 차와서 시티닝 기고 줘요 언디 나시 수름 송요도 뇨모바디 파가제 뇨모바 가반자 다 라신이가라 강아마 용야게 용야디 파가도 보래 데메도 다 아니 그 지금 아주 융하게 자와진 지기로와 제요도제 샬라 미네바다 랑라 펜베 라신이가라 펜베 자와도 지고 데네자 라신이가라 펜베 자와지 라신이가라 디기 용고래 제래 아디숨고래
Then to the second line, moonlight to cool the heat of the afflictions. So ethical, or rather the alternative, sorry, ethical restraint is the water cleansing stains of harmful conduct. The second line, it is the moonlight dispelling the burning torment of the afflictions. Sorry, we're not reading my own translation. So the first line from my own translation, ethical restraint is the water cleansing stains of harmful conduct. Second line, it is the moonlight dispelling the burning torment of the afflictions. So burning torment here, burning torment of the afflictions, this is something that we only become aware of as we start to pay close attention to our mind. Because the afflictions we are very habituated to, and we aren't always aware of the impact they have on us. And it's only through looking closely will we see why they are likened to burning torment. Because as one is more ethical or more restrained in one's restrained from the afflictions, they have less impact, we start to experience a coolness of mind, a mind that is not blazing from the afflictions. In other words, our mind is more peaceful, it's calmer. But then when we notice what happens as the afflictions arise, that calm is destroyed. There's a burning within. And the stronger the affliction, the greater that burning is within us. So here we can think, through looking at our mind, we'll come to see how the afflictions are correctly likened to a burning torment, in that our peace of mind is destroyed. And from this, not only do we suffer in the immediate term, but should we express ourselves, harm comes to others. So we take, for example, anger. When our mind becomes angry, this is where we can really experience an inner burning, a mental burning. It's clear, we are not happy, we are suffering. And when we express it to others, even if it's just through a facial expression, but certainly if it's through our way of speaking, or if we engage violently with others, we only lead to suffering for others as well. So therefore, in the immediate term, we are suffering and others are suffering too. And moreover, we're creating the causes, the karmic causes, that when they ripen in our future lives, will ripen in further experiences of suffering. So in the short term for ourselves and others, as well as in the long term in our future lives, only suffering results from the afflictions. So this we need to recognize within ourselves, not just in the case of anger, but with all the afflictions. And to the extent that we can see the grave danger that the afflictions do play in our life, to that extent, we'll want to, firstly, not allow them to arise and to dominate, and secondly, to prevent their arisal, or to prevent them from remaining powerful within us if they do arise, we'll want to cultivate their antidotes, their contrary minds. So if we realize or recognize within us the extent that anger or frustration, annoyance naturally, spontaneously arises within us, and we see that we have an issue with anger, for example, to the extent that we'll see that, we will apply ourselves to cultivating the contrary mind, minds of love and compassion. So in dependence on seeing with clarity the grave danger anger plays within us, in dependence on that, we will apply ourselves with vigor to cultivating its antidotes, minds such as love and compassion. And to the extent that we apply ourselves to the cultivation of a loving and compassionate outlook, anger will start to arise with less ease, with less frequency, with less strength, and should it arise, with less duration. So there's a proportionality between the antidote and the affliction. In this case, between love and compassion and anger. And so just like when we are hot inside our room and we go outside into a cool breeze, so too, through cultivating ethical restraint, restraining our mind so that it doesn't follow any afflictions that arise, but rather keeping our mind on virtue, we will not bring harm to others, and rather we'll benefit them. This way, we experience happiness from having a peaceful, calm mind. We experience happiness from being of benefit to others, and others too experience benefit. And in this way, instead of creating the causes for suffering in the future lives that afflictions always result in, rather through virtue arising and acting under the influence of virtue, we're creating the causes that will result in happiness in our future lives. So this is then the meaning of the second line. Ethical restraint is the moonlight dispelling the burning torment of the afflictions.
난 기후 람네 베 미소 망보스고 미소 망부 나네 소사랑 추름야고 손제 소소 추름 손지 되어바이나 아니 라신이가라 강아 제기 아니 질룡하게 쥐어 태야다 되네 용 말에서 제가 매봐서 라신이가라 강아 제야다 공 말제 제사 되네자 아니 그래서 기후 위나 시기와 기와 망보 주 뒤에 미망보 초비 위소 소사랑 추름야고 손지 되어바이나 and Delia and Beje Garsori Lunagi Jubanga Bambutembata, Rasinigal, Nipiki Java, the young Malaysia.
And the third line, in the midst of beings, ethical restraint is majestic like Mount Meru. In the midst of beings, it is majestic like Mount Meru. The meaning here is, to the extent that one has restrained one's mind ethically, it's restrained one's mind so that it doesn't come under the influence of the afflictions, one will not harm others, one will not have harmful minds arising, and therefore not interact with others in a harmful manner. Therefore, and I'll read the line again, in the midst of beings, ethical restraint is majestic like Mount Meru. So therefore, no matter what circumstances one finds oneself in, no matter how trying those circumstances, to the extent that one is skilled in remaining ethical, one will not become overwhelmed by the afflictions and therefore will not harm others. No matter whom one is with, no matter how trying one finds certain people, if one is skilled in the cultivation of ethics, no matter whom one is with, one's mind will stay subdued, and one will not be overwhelmed by the afflictions, and therefore will not interact with others in a harmful manner. So therefore, no matter what circumstances or whomever one is with, one's mind will stay subdued, will stay ethical. This is the meaning of the third line. In the midst of beings, ethical restraint is majestic like Mount Meru.
리 첨보로 치워 리 첨보로 치 림보사 지라는 템부 쉬우세요 지 림보 따보지 당한 저 ben에 행동을 지를 자스나 지고로 행동 첨부배 차고 첨부 행동 첨부 쉬우 죄외나 그 템부르지 대 신충충으로 지게 되나 그 템부요 말 하서는 대 신충충 계변은 사바드스 레베네 사베파 요 주교 구교다 파 교야다 수교야다 안 교야다 안지 내래 차고식 첨부를 되는 마구 차야다 아니 차줘야다 아니 미션다지기 뒤와 라과 찬스나 야 차초서나 철라 당초시 책으로 행동 충충으로 제 되는데 그 템부요 말아 행동 차고 템부 쉬우 첨부 쉬우 죄외는 라바 가제겠네 라바게 시라강아테마도 미다데네네 곧 잘라네 곧 너기면 템부시 되고와 아니 디나시다 림보치 베네 행동을 마서는 디레 당한 저기 리로치네 림보세 지다 리로 첨보시고 되네 첨보시고에나 코페 템부레서 그 룽수블레베나 구교다 두고 말에 가는 차바 가제겠네 고 매워서 되고 막 코페 구교마다 그 템부시 되고 그래 저래 언디나시 소소라랑 수림 약부스는 류가 있으면 예주시하나 내가 지금에 sab이 수림 소야다 배낭아 수림지 때라 가서 숨 여러와다 숨가게 예주된 수림 아니 개와 취득 수림 아니 심제 된지 수림도 하고 손제 소소하고 손제 야네 야도 삼단지 소소로 송되바 있나 미망부의 길이여베네 아니 샬레 류가 녀바지 리고 말해 배낭아 저기 수림 약 숨매바이나 아니 소소게 제게 되버지 녀레 소소게 군노아 개매베네 나 로바 가실레데 어당아도 디지지고 고마고 콜리아지 제왕 땅고 세비 로바기 파지네 남서 오레레 생님도 좋네 아니 정행이 제디 고합 용고로와 녀가요로와 안데네 수름 숨매나 양 파쇼기 미찬다기 아니 지기 네비게 뜻 류나게 넘주다 뜻 지금 냠바라 지 통소 된 통선 남사 파콩랑 쳐셔다 아니 지 네바 이슈셔 자야게 용구로 미션에게 수수랍네 양 남사 파랍 쳐셔로 제산디 템부메바와 템부메바래 제산 더 추dim마 송외긴 다 추dim야고 송어제 소수바있네 미션다기 어당한테 구마구고 지기 거의 파쇼게 지 네비게 자와 제고라베네 어당아 지금 배서 안디 곧 소장수 투바 되투고스 미네바지도 고스 안 미션다기 안 지기 소설야 안 직수다 되네게 주영한로 제 되네게 직수라서야 넘유 독자 때문에 소소게 수림 숨고여서 파 코로 말아마지 안 지기 되투고스 제가 소소게 셈 주고마 셈 마주반 소소 셈 뢰시시 되투야다 아니 리 견제네 아니 류하기 죄방 안바 마템바 샬레 니비 자와 미제바 미제데 소소렌 사라라 미네바 샬레 미네바 안디게 안데니게 제명도 데니게 샬레 니비 자와 록바디게 데니게 제야게 데니게 데요데 소소게 숭 되토바인자 수림 수비게 제부디 개와 치마이네야 밀하다 밀개와 안디데레야 디기뇽와 안디 용고래 제사 데네자 맞게 수림 송와이나 야보 송와인 미가서 초보게 마모기를 되베네 소소게야 아니 지게 샬레 니비 자와스 제야게 홍콩어데 리그 말에 말레바나 라샬 샤라신 이걸 네베 자와 지금 말에 미네바 메제바자 라신 이걸 네베 자와리 네바도 연구 말에 디 메제바도 수르마 송완자 안 개와 치마이나 하다 미고 바티비 규사 투고래 제사 데네자 수르미하고 송반에 데네게 템부슈시 연구를 해서라다 디스고르다
To continue with the third line, in the midst of beings, it is majestic like Mount Meru. Mount Meru is a mythical, huge, and stable, majestic and stable mountain in the sense of the world. But for our analogy, we can use what we have surrounding us. There are not too many mountains here, but there are many trees. So if we think of a great big mature tree and compare it to just a little sapling next to it, these two are very different in terms of stability. The mature tree can stand up to almost any weather that is thrown at it. But the little sapling, this can easily be destroyed by climatic events. So similarly here, to the extent that one develops ethical restraint within oneself, especially when one trains in cultivating this intention not to harm others, but rather to benefit them. In other words, where one trains in ensuring that no afflictions will be allowed to arise or dominate, but rather one keeps one's mind on virtue, to the extent that that is powerful within us through repeated and sustained meditation, then whatever circumstance we encounter, our ethics will remain stable. Therefore, we will remain calm and peaceful, and we'll be able to respond in a skillful manner. So right now, we often will find ourselves in a situation where we respond habitually, and afterwards we maybe have some regret. We recognize that perhaps one responded with anger, and yet again in these circumstances I responded with anger, or whatever the circumstance that you're trying to transform. But to the extent that one can develop ethics within oneself, one will become stable. Mentally, one will be in control of one's mind, and therefore, when one experiences trying circumstances, one will be able to deal with it skillfully. One will not be overwhelmed. One will not respond in the habitual way that one used to. Or another situation would be if we are feeling pressured to do something that we are uncomfortable with. Feeling pressured, we may choose to take the path of least resistance. We may choose to justify going along with the pressure that we feel. But if we've cultivated a strong core of ethics within us, it will be much easier to withstand that pressure. And not only will it be easier to withstand that pressure, but if we are trained well, we will be able to respond in a skillful manner, perhaps even guiding other people away from non-virtue. So this will come about through repeated training of a sustained period, cultivating the wish not to bring harm, but to bring benefit. And especially when we're cultivating this on the subtle levels of not allowing the harmful intent, afflicted minds to arise, but rather ensuring that the mind remains remains virtuous. When we're training well on that subtle level, we will then be like the mythical Mount Meru, majestic in the face of any torment that comes our way, any difficulties that come our way. When we trained well like this, our mind will stay calm and peaceful. We will be able to respond in a skillful manner. We will thereby not only not be adding to the harm that others may, or the suffering others are experiencing, but we'll be able to respond skillfully, beneficially, bringing happiness to ourselves and others in the immediate term, and creating the karmic causes that we will achieve good rebirths in our future lives and be able to continue our spiritual development. And we'll find then in our future lives when we are born, we will have an inclination not to harm others. We will naturally be the kind of person who will not want to harm others. We will not respond in an aggressive manner. We will rather respond in a harmonious manner. Similarly, we will want to benefit others. We will have that inclination. We'll have that personality because of cultivating ethical restraint in this life.
Topji dikpa meba drogun duis. That topji dikpa meba drogun duis, topji dikpa sidi pa kanga tewa sigorwa. But the so wanshu da, nuba da, the niki peshe tangje, shenlia, and chik kanga tea da, the niki nuba chimboene, and mission de negaprilia, and kolia kushep chigua. Kushep mission oda nga legan pigre, kanga tigre, nga zungan tangre, ngalia cheba tangre, something, the niki shenangi ongi, kolia kushep chigre, kushep chesigre, and go up chigredu, and ya, kolia kapdeja, and what ya the ungdua, just top you ongi cheban. Just Surum Yabosoma dele, Yapo Yamle Soso, Surum Yapo Yamlen Jevaina, Shanlia, and once Bejet Naje, and Jake, Nushu, Shu, Bejet Naje, once a base of Colia, Ganga Jeje, and Mateva Hina, Soso, Surin Yamlen, Yapo Jeban, Chazangi, Sosolia, draw Chasangi, Drogon, Du said, Gushep Chigres, draw some Sosolia, Gushep Chigres. Matawanta, once Bejetan, Tango Martina, Ranshi, Mishasangi, Delia, Guship Chigres, Gavucia, and Guship Chigres, Chazan, Topki, Tikpa, Meba, Drogon Deuce, one shoe Bejet, new shoe Bejet, I call it Gangate, Dene Majeba Inaya, Shan Chazangi, and 차상이라 구십지기 해서 조금 뒤세야 돼.
The fourth line, it draws together all beings without any threat of force. It draws together all beings without any threat of force. So here we can think of where someone has power over us, especially if they can create problems in our lives. We'll have a little bit of apprehension when approaching them, and especially if they have an aggressive personality, if they're particularly self-centered, we know that this may not go well, and therefore we'll be quite fearful in their presence. Someone, though, on the other hand, who's ethical, who's cultivated ethical restraint well within them, beings will be not only drawn to them, but will feel no fear in their presence. So should you develop well the mind of ethics within you, meaning that the afflictions do not arise, and therefore you do not act under the influence of the afflictions, people will be relaxed. They will feel peaceful in your presence. When they see you approaching, their mind will not be agitated. In fact, it may calm. Moreover, should you now in future lives, whatever power you have, you will utilize this to benefit others. You won't utilize it in the way that many do, to take advantage of others, to benefit themselves. Rather, the power and the influence that you have, you will utilize to benefit others, to benefit your community, not just yourself. And people recognizing this quality within you, moreover, they will feel peaceful and calm in your presence. They'll be receptive to you. And as someone who wants to benefit others, them being receptive to you, them being peaceful and calm in your presence, will mean you can influence them, guide them towards virtue with greater ease. So this then is the meaning of the fourth line. Ethical restraint draws together all beings without any threat of force.
나 저기 나 이나 통치수교바 여러와다 미가시에다 지금 소소권의 침보다 왕시 유디급라 지금 왕시 배제 다시도 미망부기 콜리아 안지 구십제다 소소 왕시 쉬어야다 마저기 안지 미망부기 견제제도 견제제다 왕지 콜리아 안지 견제제가 강하대 응고로와다 통치수교바래 아니면 나디 소소게 또 쉬우다 소소게 왕지 배제 다데 현대의 구구르 소소리 구십제의 템부요 말했어 그래서 소수가 원치 냠바이나 아니 소수를 90씩 말해 아니 제 파초들이야 한 캡틴으로 마리기 왜 레용도 소설이야 안 거고 제야다 90마치 결라 갑되지 이거로 봐도 그래서 통초스기가 차도 봐 아니 소수가 원치 베제 땅지 배 누슈잖아 맞제베네 차사 그거 90제야디 배는 아주 겨울음치로 이마이나 겨울음치를 덤블리다 최로 가다 수이나 차상이 90지고로 와 이 가르치기에서는 여러분이 지기 수름하고 송구요 반자 내할 때는 아니 차상기 90제야 디리고로 마도 지금 왕천의 레간이 비기리 아니 예바 땅그래 팀 땅그래 삼지 뒤내시는 90지고 말와 안디네자 고 가르쳐봤으네 수름 수위에 또 비지고 그래서 니다 90제야 소소 수름 냠내 야고 제야 니 또비 생기 90제야 템부 그러자 템부 미산다기 견제 어디 말에 디다다래다서 템부온 거지 제가 되네자 디 90제야의 조건 뒤세 소소 수령님네 제바이나 미산다기 90제야다 디 90제야 템부 균형불이야 다 톱슈기 톱기샬래 원년제나 되스 내가 부른 90제기네 템부요 말에 아니 균형불이야 내요 말이디
You'll have illustrations in your own life of those who do have power, whether it's in a family or in a place of work or leaders within society, how they can use that power to try and benefit themselves and will readily use their power and influence to bring harm to others. And you'll also see that such people in society are often treated with deference, were shown tremendous respect. But when one is either having to show such deference or respect to such a person or is observing it, you know it's not sincere. And not being sincere, you know it's not reliable. And as soon as you are not in their presence, it will not be shown. It will not be felt towards that person. But a person who is truly ethical, whilst they are shown deference and respect, it is sincere and it is reliable. And we can take here as an illustration His Holiness. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama is treated with great reverence and respect wherever he goes. And those who are showing him this deference are not doing so out of fear. They're not fearing a scolding or problems in their career. They are doing it with sincerity because they hold him in such esteem because of who he's proven himself to be. Therefore, such respect is reliable and stable. Therefore, these people, the people before His Holiness, they are open to him. They are open to him, to his influence. He is able, therefore, to directly benefit them and guide them. Whereas in society, for those who misuse their power, misuse their influence, it's a very different circumstance. One may follow the directions given out of fear, but one will not be developed spiritually. One will not grow as a person by someone who misuses their power and influence. So the kind of person we want to be, someone who has benefit, brings benefit into the lives of others, through cultivating ethical restraint within us, we will be able to have a positive influence on others and thereby a positive impact in their lives.
아니 가서 녀모 배매바 소야라 주름 소야도 취나시리 아니 녀모 배 강아테 세야리아 다위외네 차동 세비게 다위외 나신 아니 직교 몽비게 되네기네 내바이나 소소라나 안지 류응이 쥐방 한번 마트엔 반 소소 템보제 네투바데 안데 흠보나 지바 흠보나신 배 템보 안디나신 안지 미šan다 차상게 소소리아 아니 지게 조화 차상에서 구두치야 되네게 연대 수좀 소마 되네 연대 여바데 두스나 하고 시에네 되네게 연대 수좀 소와에 판연 되네 여바다 하고 전에 아니 양다 랑비스데 아니 수좀 야 지게 라마절야 수좀 소야게 네 수좀 너무 쉬야게 domba랑야다 다디 장시 삼바디게 시월 dom바랑야다 dom바랑 수좀 하다 보송 되네 요송비게 수름하고서 담반남기 믹신 송화 제스데 되네게 수름랑에 수름되다 마카웨게 배 소소 예첨보쇼 전에 바 수름데 냠렌지고 그랬으면 송고래서 수름 마냥바제 안 송고래서 먼저 믹 나중 아주 수부샤신 믹디 예치쇼 쇼체고다 믹 메나 안에 파주 좋아요 말 칼라사야다스 배 강아 체고로 디나시 믹디 쇼 송공한 저게 예첨보쇼 나시 다 수름데 배 마세 예첨보쇼 제제는 안 기부 담바스데 냠 냠렌 전시사만 남기 두스는 냠렌 능고래서 고래.
Then the final two lines. Knowing this, holy beings perfectly guard the ethics they have chosen to adopt as they do their eyes. So again, the last two lines. Knowing this, holy beings perfectly guard the ethics they have chosen to adopt as they do their eyes. The first part of these two lines, knowing this refers then to the preceding four lines, which makes reference to some of the many benefits that comes through training oneself in ethics. So knowing this, knowing the benefits of ethics, holy beings perfectly guard the ethics they have chosen to adopt as they do their eyes. So the benefits that we've looked at here are that ethical restraint is like the water cleansing stains of harmful conduct. In other words, through restraining one's mind so that it isn't influenced by the afflictions, one will not create negative karma through harsh speech or through harsh behavior, nor through even harsh ways of thinking. And moreover, one will not bring harm to others in this way. So there's benefit to self and others, and not creating this harmful, negative karma. One will not be creating causes that will lead to suffering in future lives too. Moreover, as in the second line, it is the moonlight dispelling the burning torment of their afflictions. One who's ethical their mind is not overwhelmed by the afflictions. In fact, their mind abides on virtue. Therefore, the burning torment of the afflictions are subdued, but rather one's mind is cool, calm, and peaceful. And moreover, the third line, in the midst of beings, it is majestic like Mount Meru. So here, one's mind is stable. No matter what difficult circumstances one encounters, or difficult people one encounters, one's mind is not overwhelmed by the afflictions. One's mind stays virtuous in that one is restraining one's mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions. And then the fourth line, it draws together all beings without any threat of force. So here, one is, through being ethical, one is held with reverence, one's treated with respect, and one utilizes this influential position to be of benefit to others. So these are the benefits that bodhisattvas are aware of, and therefore, going to the next lines, holy beings perfectly guard the ethics they have chosen to adopt as they do their eyes. The ethics they have chosen to adopt refers to the vows or the promises that great practitioners, the holy beings, the bodhisattvas, have taken. And the reference to their eyes, this shows that just like we guard our eyes, everyone guards their eyes because we protect our sight. We don't want to go blind because of the problems that we would incur. This shows the importance, this reference to guarding one's eyes, shows the importance of the training of ethics. The bodhisattva guards their ethics in the same way that ordinary beings guard their eyes.
추림데 예치마지 미나진 예치마지 송고레스 베디나시 가라주이네 다대와 되바르 동아 미디오바인자 당아주이네 룽아 예수 예주세야디 자오기네 지메 선비게 섬로데 야네 양도 다야레 데니게 땅제네다 야네 양도 땅 안디 가주게다 개와 추디 추림 데네 삼단에 개위 자와 같이 툭툭툭툭 제야다 아니 샹리야 팬비게 자와 같이 툭툭 제야 돼 가지고 되게 좀 자고래 제가 이게 빼면서 게좀 모르겠어요. 양주이나 디 라란 냠는 제야 돼 가지고 디시고야 차고로 디네 자다 디네게 추림세야 돼 송바이나 개와치말 하다 미고바 토야래 추림고 그래서 제가 추림 마소만에 개와치말 하다 미고바 토투고 말해서 개와len 두고 말해서 추림 마소바이나 아니 가지고 탈비고바 토비에 삼다베네 탈비고바 토투고 말해서 제가 추림 탈비고바 토야게 년되다 라한지 람 냠는 제도 추림 송제되네 디가 냠는 탈바탐지 탈비고바 토고래 다 산이고바 토야래 추림 송고 추림 마소바나 산이고바 토투고 말해서 디 제가 룽아 예수님 예점디 마돈바나 예지 양생한테 리기로 마돈바나 예지 양생한테 레네 탈바토도야 말 산이고바 토도에 메로 돼서 가지고 개와치 말하다 미고바 토베네 토바 삼단에 추림 송고래 다행하죠. 탈비고바 토바 냠내 제반에 수림 송고래 산여고바 토바 되는 수림 송고래 제가 수림배 마싱하죠. 연된 탐지 중요하게 사신하시리 예사지 안도스는 송고래 되는 장안주기나 달륜아 유순 예제된 비수 자와인 지금에 선배게데 야내 야동하죠. 삼다에 되게 치모 차고라 당안주기다 대닝아주 지원이 차고로 다 랍주이나 디가리아 지금에 너무 쉬셔겨다 되네기나 아직 디아 송고데 지구로 송고 셔 태와 nem바로 열어봐다.
We're coming to the end of our time together tonight, and these last two lines are a good place to end. In particular, the last segment of this final line, as they do their eyes, because this again shows the importance that bodhisattvas, these great and holy beings, place on ethics, on ethical restraint. It is an indispensable training. It is the most important practice. As I said right at the start of our class, none of us want to suffer. None of us want even the slightest problem, even the slightest frustration. We want to be freed of that. We want a mind that's peaceful, at ease, calm, abiding in happiness. The crucial training to achieve that is ethics. the crucial training. The crucial training to have happiness in this life, as well as future lives, the crucial training to be of benefit to others, is this training. I cannot emphasize enough how important this training is. So here, just in our conclusion, I'll draw out two key reasons why this is so important. Through being ethical, through cultivating the mind of ethical restraint, we accumulate virtuous karma. When this karma ripens as a propelling karma that propels a rebirth, it is this karma that will lead to a good rebirth as a human or God. It is the ripening of ethics, the ripening of a karmic seed of ethics that propels a rebirth as a human or God, not in the suffering lower realms. So that is one key reason to ensure that in our future lives we have a rebirth as good as this. We have to accumulate the causes that come from ethics. The second key reason is that ethical restraint is the foundation for all good qualities. It is the soil from which all good qualities grow. In other words, whichever good qualities you as a spiritual practitioner wish to give rise to, whether you want to become a more loving person, a more compassionate person, whether you want to develop calm abiding, whether you have as a goal liberation from suffering in its entirety or enlightenment, whatever spiritual goal you have, this is the foundation. A mind that is not overwhelmed by the afflictions, a mind that is restrained, that is subdued so that the afflictions cannot arise, that mind is the fertile soil in which the good qualities such as calm abiding, such as love, compassion, wisdom, and so forth can grow. So for this second reason, we need to cultivate ethical restraint. The first is the cause that leads to good rebirths, and the second, every other good quality we want arises in dependence on ethics. So therefore, to become the person we all long to be will come about in dependence on training in ethics. So then we'll conclude here for tonight, and we've concluded at the training and the perfection of ethics, and then next week we'll start in the third of the six perfections, that of patience. If you have some questions, feel free to ask. If you need to go and you can't wait for the questions, then it's fine, feel free to leave. Okay, then we'll finish there. Thank you very much.